Welcome to Season 2 of the Erotic Realm podcast, where we explore the world of eroticism, one erotic realm at a time. I'm Em, a sexologist and kinkster. The mission of the Erotic Realm is to humanize desire in all of its forms, including darker desires. Each episode, we dive deep into the psychology of desire with a sexpert, everyday kinkster, or a kink expert. This is an independent podcast. To support it, please consider becoming a paid subscriber at psychologyofdesire.com, where you'll also find deep dives into desire and surveys that you can participate in. You can also sign up there to get the podcast delivered directly to your inbox when it's released. And now for today's episode. The following conversation explores power, leadership, and what it really means to hold authority, erotically and beyond. Today, I'm joined by Leadfromfront, a CEO, scientist, and long-term dominant to explore the difference between domination and leadership and how power can be held ethically over decades. We talk about consent as something that grants power rather than limits it, the difference between hurt and harm, and why true dominance is rooted in attunement, responsibility, and service, not control. This is a conversation about power as something that's earned, given, and sustained, and what it means to lead both in the boardroom and in the bedroom. Enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Erotic Realm. Today, I'm delighted to be exploring the erotic realm of Leadfromfront, or LFF. Welcome, LFF.
Thank you. I appreciate being here, sorcerers. Look forward to a lovely conversation.
Happy to have you. So I'd love to start with you as a person, first of all. What does your day-to-day life look like right now?
Well, I'm in kind of a transitional place. I'm now 75 years old. I had a very aggressive life as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. I'm trained as a scientist, and I'm in semi-retirement. And I'm living with a new partner, owned puppet. And so I'm navigating learning a new 24/7 engagement. I am being distressed about the state of what's happening in the United States. And in particular, I'm very distressed about what's happened with Silicon Valley, who's changed from being a very liberal place to being, I think of a radical Nazi place. And I'm trying to re-engage with some of my old passions about particularly mentoring young students. So it's a transitional phase.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned about your partner being owned puppet, who of course has been on the show before. She was on early, I think, number 15. So
Yep.
I'll ask you a little bit about her and your relationship later, which is exciting.
Okay.
So when you talk about yourself erotically, how do you currently identify in terms of your sexuality and kinky self?
Oh, labels. Oh my God. I first of all think about kinky stuff as relationships, as being any relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think about, I come to my eroticism thinking of myself as a person that evolved in many ways from my work. I discovered that as a CEO of a company with very smart people, I was bored with top-down kind of management. If I have to micromanage people, I'm in the wrong place and they're in the wrong place.
Mm.
I love independent, strong people that are self-motivated and in which I can create a shared vision to lead us, as the name Leadfromfront suggests, to lead us jointly to success. And that works in my world of business. It motivated me to create cool stuff. And it motivates me in personal relationships about, for example, I don't believe in a punishment dynamic at all. How boring.
Okay.
I find that people are most successful when incentivized to pleasure and to success.
Mm. It's interesting. I haven't had anyone on the podcast that's mentioned that before.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to punish someone, oh, come on. That's boring. And I find myself that's rather radical, I think, in terms of the whole BDSM area. Most people think about punishment dynamics. Oh my God, I got to tell people what to do, and that's what dominants do. And I find in the real world, in high performance environments, that's not exactly what leaders don't do.
So you believe in building people up, not putting them down?
Absolutely. The reward is a far bigger incentive than failure. And most people, when they fail, punish themselves. They're incentivized to success. Right. They wanted to be successful. Why do I have to beat up on them? Boring. Instead, I should reward the things they do right, and they'll do more of them. The best thing you can say to someone in business, or I think in a personal relationship, is do more of that, as opposed to do less of that, right? And I find it works.
I love that approach.
So I'm a top. I discovered that I'm highly motivated by consent, and I can only really participate with someone when I hear there's an explicit sense of consent and that they know what's going on. And so the idea of I find that I get aroused by giving consensual pain. And for me, consensual pain is arousal. We're mutually aroused. And as we all know, but pardon me, at all, as many of us know, many of the key things we find pleasure from or pain from are the same fucking hormones. And our bodies are driven by that hormonal response. And arousal, high arousal, I find that in a partner that's highly aroused, it's hard to distinguish between pain and pleasure. And most people can't. And that's why safe words don't work, because when you're highly aroused, you have no idea what's going on as a submissive. And so you really depend on an educated, perceptive partner to be able to navigate through that complex hormonal response.
So how did you discover the world of kink? It sounds like you've been in it for quite some time.
Golly, I was old.
Oh, okay.
I was 35.
Oh, that's not old.
I was a CEO at the time. I was seduced by my secretary.
Oh.
Bad. I was a bad boy. It was professionally a bad thing, but I was young and stupid. So simultaneously old and young at the same time. And I discovered that there was an immense connection between what I was doing daily and leading people and what it meant to do great sex together and have a great relationship with someone that is very intimate. And I think one of the things about the whole kink area is I find it to be far more intimate than what we think about as standard sex, right? You have to be more vulnerable. You have to be more careful. You have to be more thoughtful. And otherwise, you do bad things. And that is a bad outcome for everybody. And by the way, I often get embarrassed by my gender. A lot of guys, they can be great tops that don't have any idea about themselves or about their own capabilities, much less how to ask questions or to relate to their partner. So they're just stupid. And they fail. And they hurt people.
Why do you think that happens? Why do you think they don't have those abilities?
Oh, come on. Men are trained to fail. I mean, we're never trained to feel acknowledge our own feelings, much less someone else's. How to ask questions about that, how to be perceptive about, how to care about that. The toxic masculinity is in all topic right now, but it's always been true, certainly during my lifetime. And I think until you can at least recognize it, I don't think you can be an effective top or a leader.
Right. So what would you say are your top 3 kinks currently? If you could only explore 3 kinks for the rest of your life from this point, what would they be?
Oh, what this is a hard thing because I find, first of all, I'm very adaptable. What arouses me, first of all, is the connection with my partner and discovering what arouses them.
Mm.
And I found that with my partners over the years, it's changed. It's been what creates that connection and that arousal. So with owned puppet, and you're thinking physical thing, or you're thinking you want things you can put a label on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find that the key kink is trust.
Mm.
And with trust, everything else is enabled. Right? And without trust, nothing happens. And so once we have trust, I think we like 2 things that I like together. We like to fuck, and she likes me to beat her. And I like to beat her.
Mm-hmm.
So if we had, so let's trust, sex, and impact.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I want to bring in a quote now that you shared because it speaks more to intention than indulgence, which is a theme that's coming up for you now. And it's by David Herbert Lawrence, who was an English novelist, short story writer, poet from the early 1900s. And he once said, "All people dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their mind wake in the morning to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous people, for they dream their dreams with open eyes and make them come true."
Isn't that a fabulous piece of writing?
Yeah, why do you love it so much? And
Well,
how does
because
it relate to your eroticism?
well, I think dreaming, but by the way, I don't remember my dreams at night very much.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare for me to remember them. But my day job for many years is dreaming. You know, we dream new products, we dream a solution to customers, we dream how we can make a dent in the universe. So look at one of the other quotes I had in my profile, which is by Steve Jobs. And those dreams by day that you choose to recognize and choose to act on, that's action. It's not passive, it's active. And I think that I find that it's immensely important to live a life, not only of passion, but a life of active passion, in the sense you somehow make a difference.
Mm.
You choose to, you don't leave the world empty, you don't, not carried by the wind of change. In fact, you're navigating against the wind. You're trying to do the best you can to make a difference. And to me, that's kind of what D.H. Lawrence is talking about, right?
Mm.
Those people that make a difference are dangerous. They're not passive. And I think that, that kind of danger, that kind of ability to try to make change is critical. For me, anyway.
Mm. So how did you become such a good leader? It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into being a good leader. It's one of your highest values to lead in a good way. And you obviously get a lot of influence from that for your domination as well. So how did you learn how to be such a good leader? Did you have mentors? Did you read about it? Did you just learn from practice? What was that process like?
I think it's by practice and by 2 things. First of all, There's leading when you're successful. And, I got thrown into it. I wasn't trained in any way to be a leader. I was trained to be a tech geek, right? Um, I knew mathematics down cold. I was a physicist. And so uh, when everything is going right and you're successful, it's easy to lead. And then I had a company in which failed, in which I had to lay everybody off. And I did it personally. I spoke to everyone. I said to exactly why we're doing this. And frankly, that notion that I was laying my employees off that I had seduced to come join me in a shared vision, and they have to figure out another job and feed their families. That was my responsibility, and I had to take ownership of that. I think that the ownership in failure was really huge, because that tells you about responsibility. It's not just the good times. It's about the fact that when you take risk, you can fail. And you need to own up to that and accept the responsibility. And I don't think you can be a leader unless you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the challenges, frankly, I'll put my little side thing right now. In the high-tech business, like, has Zuckerberg ever failed? No. Which means he's incompetent and doesn't understand. And I think we've been living in a consistent for the past 20 years of success in high tech, and it colors the world in a bad way. And when it happens, it will be bad, because we all have to fail eventually. We can't. The bubble doesn't last forever.
Mm-hmm. So
Anyway.
To be a good leader, you believe that you need to be humbled at some point or have some humility as well. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, because without humility, what are you? You're an arrogant prick. Nobody likes arrogant pricks.
Well, I'd like to dive. What was that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to dive deeper into power and what power does to people with you. So one of the traditions on the podcast is exploring a research article with you. And today's research is actually a book. And you probably know it. It's the Power Paradox, which explores the differences between ethical power and coercion. And the author, Keltner, argues that power is originally granted to people because they serve, protect, or contribute, and only later gets confused as something owned. Do you agree that erotic power is given to you by a partner rather than something that you claim?
Oh, yeah. It's a consensual thing, right? It just goes back to consent. Mm-hmm. And curiously goes back to the Enlightenment, because it's the difference between, kings feeling that they had entitled power, as opposed to the Enlightenment, which really said the power came from below, from the people. And there's this wonderful, I'm not familiar with your particular article, but there's the one, you're familiar with the prison guard experiment at Stanford, right?
Yes, yep.
And I think that's relevant to this, right? Because we found that ordinary people put in the position of power with no controls and no training become micro-Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the power has to be, we find this argument back to Plato, right? In the sense of who guards the guardians. And I think that power given in the hands of people that think they're entitled to it is a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be, you can do it fun in a play scenario, but in a relationship, it has to be devastating, right? Because you drain the energy from both sides.
Mm.
And I think that, people talk about total power exchange relationships and blah, 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 blah. I don't believe that. I've been privileged to see long-term partnerships, including my own. And it's a dynamic. It's 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 a it's a dialogue, and it's a continuous process in which there are reasonably two confident people that have made a choice to engage in a certain kind of dynamic about power, and that dynamic can change every day, and it probably does change every day. And um, but consent is the core of that. Knowledge and consent,
Mm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
and trust. Frankly, without trust, there's nothing.
Mm.
So I find many people, as I look at the observer on, say, FetLife, for example, I find a large number of naive people on both sides of the slash thinking about what power means and how they'd like to experience it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in mature, long-term, loving relationships that include a DS dynamic, there's a respect and a humility that has to go with it.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So in the book, Keltner talks about the corrupting risk of power. And
Yes.
he describes that power often erodes the very empathy and attunement that helped someone earn it in the first place. Have you seen this happen in erotic or professional spaces, that someone's earned power and then the power itself has eroded them?
Not so much in the kink space, but certainly in business all the time, right? We see leaders all the time that they believe they're empowered and they make shitty decisions. And I was going to remark again that, have you read Plato's Republic, by the way?
Oh, many years ago in university. Many
you may
years
want
ago.
to you may want to renew it because I think it's relevant here.
Mm-hmm.
Because the same idea, because Plato was really talking about power, right? And how where does power reside, and where does it affect you? And I don't agree with all his conclusions, but he does a great analysis. And but I think this kind of discussion about power and what succeeds and fails is it's a discussion at least as long as we have writing. So arguably since Homer, right? So 3,000 years. Okay. I think remind me where we are again.
I was just asking if you'd seen people gain power and then have it erode them in erotic or professional spaces. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we can look today everywhere around us, right? We can look at, my God, I'm going to say his name, Trump, and here's a man who has gained power and abuses it every day and erodes his moral fiber a little bit more every day. So it wasn't very high in the beginning, and he not only that destroys everyone around him, and I think this is incredibly common, and I haven't peeked into many. You've probably peeked into more people's individual experience than I have. But as we peek into kinksters and personal relationships, I think the same thing is true. Power corrupts. And we have to there has to be a balance about it. There has to be a thoughtful balance about it.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about healthy power. In the book, he describes that power remains healthy when it's exercised in ways that benefit others rather than inflate the self. So in your dynamic with Owned Puppet, how do you personally evaluate whether it's being nourishing for your partner and not just for your arousal? How do you make sure that it's healthy power?
Ooh. Well, first of all, she would have to, I'd want to hear her opinion, but I'm gonna. We've talked about this enough. I think I feel confident I can speak about it. My goal with her and with any partner is to improve myself and them. If we're not getting better about life and enjoying life more and gaining more competence, we're doing something wrong. I'm doing something wrong.
Mm.
And uh, so I think there needs to be this continual hungry desire, not just to be satisfied with getting my will expressed, but rather about being effective, about joining us in a common direction that benefits us both, and getting joy out of that, getting joy from the group as opposed to just feeding my own ego. Now, I have a substantial ego and I'm very confident about it. But part of that ego is all about how do I serve the relationship that I'm in? Any top that doesn't believe they're in service, we giggle about service tops, right? But all of us, we all serve. We serve our communities, we serve our partners, serve our kids, and if we don't serve, boy, we're just an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And who wants to be an asshole?
So you describe your relationships as deeply consensual and communication rich. Mm-hmm. What conversations must happen before power ever becomes erotic?
Oh. I think, so first of all, I'm going to disagree with you a bit. I think okay. I'll relate our own first date with something.
Please, I was wondering about that.
we had talked a bit online, and then I invited her to lunch, and we went to a nice restaurant, and it was clear. The power dynamic was already clear, but she was, shall we say, far less experienced than I was, and much of her stuff had come from reading, which means you're a voyeur fundamentally, right? Reading is a wonderful thing, but it's a voyeur experience. And we all know that until you've done something yourself, failed or succeeded at it yourself, you don't really know what the fuck is going on. And so, I think I've related several times, and you explored on your own, that I told her to come for me as I was in the restaurant. And she did. I said, wow. What the fuck? Yeah. I said, what the, okay, this is cool. I got power. And then I told her the harder piece was actually, she kept coming until I told her to stop. So that was even spookier, frankly, right? The idea that I control not only the start of the orgasm, but when she finishes it. Mm-hmm. Oh, God. That was a new experience for me. So, all right, that's fun. Then she asked me, she's interested in CNC, consensual non-consent. Now, I like CNC, but fundamentally it's all about consent, right? You consent to certain boundaries and you consent to certain religion, and it's all about knowing something about this. So CNC is not, frankly, a first date discussion. But I was amused. Here's someone that I barely met asking about wanting a CNC relationship. I said, sure, let's go do that. And she still kids me to this, but I took advantage of her and got us into a CNC relationship without fully telling her what that meant. And so our personal joke then is, well, it was CNC with an invisible contract with fine print in the footnotes, but always changing. And fundamentally what that means is we're always in discussion. We're always in dynamic. And it's my responsibility, as I promised to her, that I will never damage you. I may hurt you. I will never damage you. Mm. And that's a big difference in my mind, and one that I hold myself very strongly to. Mm. And so we can navigate through that by saying, okay, we want to explore this thing about pain, pleasure. We want to explore things possibly about the nasty things, about degradation, humiliation, right? Which are emotional things that are very challenging, I think, and can be very damaging. But I have to take the responsibility of causing no harm or damage.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's something that, doctors say, right? Do no harm. It's the same kind of thing, I think, for a good tub. Do no harm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that answered your question, but I think I wandered a bit.
No, it did. I was just curious about the difference between hurting and damage. So what do you mean by damage? Because for someone that hasn't got a lot of experience in kink or is new to kink, they might be a bit confused by the difference between the two.
Damage means that I think damage is in the moment. It depends on the relationship and what dynamic is happening in the moment. Some people view damage differently, and that's why I think that a top needs to be very conscious of this.
Mm.
Damage to me is something that violates not only the explicit consent but the implicit. It violates trust,
Right.
and it's something that is, I think, general. As I would be thinking about this, it would be something relatively long lasting that hurts some fundamental values. Um, like, for example, I have done damage once to Own Puppet. We were playing around. I had violated one of my rules, which I was doing impact when I had had a couple glasses of wine.
Mm.
And I slapped her too hard in the wrong way, from the wrong angle. And I gave her a black eye.
Mm-hmm.
My fault. My bad. Wasn't intentional. I'm unhappy about that. I need to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And I call that damage.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So did you have a particular process of aftercare you went through when that did happen? Because I'm sure there's some people listening that are wondering what to do if they do make a mistake, and mistakes do happen.
First of all, you own up to it,
Mm-hmm.
and you apologize. You stop the scene, stop whatever you're doing, right? And you balance yourself out. Now, I'm lucky that I don't know if Own Puppet confessed to this on here, but she's a trained critical care nurse. She's been a trauma nurse. She knows more about this than I'll ever know. So she owns in our relationship the medical department. Right? So she knew exactly what had happened and exactly how to treat it. So thank God, someone was prepared to take responsibility. And we iced it and we reduced the swelling as much as we could. And then that's about all you can do for that kind of thing. And she had to go to work the next day. So then we had to move into damage control, right?
Mm.
So how do we explain this? And I'm forgetting now the exact legend we put together. But we put together a legend because you can't always tell the truth.
No.
And this is one of those cases.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I believe, she then was amused by it enough that she posted, I think she's posted a picture on her profile with her and a black eye.
Mm-hmm.
And we confessed about it and talked about it because we're all imperfect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And would you say that's another sign of a good leader, one that owns up to their mistakes in public as they can be?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we like to work for a boss that admits they make mistakes?
Mm.
Nobody's perfect. We giggle about working for someone, that doesn't admit mistakes, right? And and we try to move to a new opportunity as soon as we can.
Mhm.
That's not a sign of great leadership. And it's like, for example, in the U.S. here, I'm not familiar enough with Australian politicians, but the difference between, for example, Trump and Obama. Obama is confident enough about himself; he can admit mistakes. He made mistakes. He says it. Trump can't do that. He's insecure enough that he simply can't admit.
Mm.
And I think the ability to admit a mistake is a sign of confidence and a sign that you are comfortable with yourself.
Mhm. Mm. Very well said. So you mentioned that you're 75 now and you have decades of leadership behind you, both professionally and erotically. What has aging taught you about erotic energy that youth couldn't?
Oh, sex gets better.
Yeah?
Yeah, can I still do the same level of multiple hard-on fucks that I could when I was 25? No. But are they much better? Is my partner much more aroused? Am I much more aroused by my partner being aroused? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Is my range of possibilities of how to arouse my partner by feeding to her fantasies and to her desires so much better because I'm less stupid? Absolutely. So I think that uh, I feel my eroticism is still getting higher. It's amazing,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of what we think of as eroticism is about passion. How do we express passion in our lives? Many people, I think you're doing your passion right now by creating this opportunity for yourself with the erotic realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting a lot of personal satisfaction from that. And my guess is, in many ways, that arouses you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that we find in our lives, when we exhibit passion in multiple ways, it arouses us. And we love to be with people that recognize that and recognize, oh my God, this is cool stuff. Let's do more of this. Rock on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often hard to find. There's so many folks in our lives that want to talk us down,
Mm.
right? Talk negative. And as opposed to the people in our lives that rejoice about our success and are not threatened by our success or by our joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so surrounding yourself in an environment, and I think that, what I've learned in my age is that I don't need those bozos. I don't need the negative Nancy's. I want to surround myself with folks that are doing amazing things and are happy about themselves and are demonstrating it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Sounds good to me. Now, if there's a young dominant man listening, what would you want to say to them about dominance and masculinity?
Ooh, ooh. First of all, don't take yourself too seriously. Um, Second, learn to listen rather than talk. Listening is an underappreciated skill of leaders. Um, we tend to think that leaders tell people what to do as opposed to listening to people and collecting that knowledge about from people and creating a unified goal together. And I think that, so second, listen. Third, um, hmm, I've been to a lot of conferences and I've listened to a lot of people tell me about their erotic ways. I'm sad that, like most of what we find on the internet, 80% is bullshit. And it's the curation of finding the great 20% is important. Also, I think the skills you build in leadership at work, with your family, with your spouse. These are all the same thing as erotic leadership. We confuse them, right? We think that, oh, sex is special and therefore kink is special. That's bullshit. The same skills we do at work, we need at work. The same skills we do with our spouse, with our lover. These are the same relationship skills. And we need to be thoughtful about all of that. We need to treat our colleagues at work, we need to treat our lovers at work with respect and listening and confidence. And you only build confidence as confidence is given to you by the people around you that say, oh, I like that. Let's do more of that. I'd like to join you and do that. That's the way to build leadership, when people decide that they like what you're doing and they want to do more of it with you.
Beautifully said. Thank you. That's great advice. As part of our conversation today, I asked you to bring along something to share, such as a quote, book, or a movie that's influenced your eroticism. Can you share what you've brought along today and how it shaped your eroticism?
Well, the quote I've ended up putting quotes on my profile on FetLive now. I still like them. And the one I'd like to pick out to share with you to end this today is the one from Steve Jobs. And it came upon me in a very strange way. I was on a trip to China, and I was on a walking trip through Lhasa in Tibet. And, okay, you're in Lhasa, Tibet. There's expectations, right? And I'm walking by on the street in Lhasa, and I pass by a post office of the Chinese post office in Lhasa, and it's a modern post office. It's not a big one, it's the size of an ordinary store, and it's glass fronted. And on this glass front, there's a quote. There's a piece of quote etched in the glass. And the glass was a quote from Steve Jobs. And it says, "We're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why else even be here?" And I said, fine. Here I am in Lhasa with a Western quote. And it's not about technology. It's about making a difference. And I think that eroticism, like our lives, I think I gauge it, but have I made a difference in the world? Have I left my partners better than I met them? It's not about whether they've left me better. It's what I've done as responsibility. Have I left them better than I met them? Have I left the environment better than I met it? And I like that a lot.
Very powerful. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm keen to hear this from you. When you think about a peak erotic experience of yours, what comes to mind? Perhaps a recent time that you've had with owned puppet?
Oh, God.
So many?
Well, I'm lucky, I've had great partners, amazing partners. And I think that one of the great evils is comparing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to focus on, with own puppet, I think that wow. So I don't think we've found our peak experience yet, but I'll share a little bit about what we've done so far. And I think that we continue to do this actually. So I'll be explicit. We in our sex. She's a 3-hole girl, so I love to have my cock in her throat. I love to fuck her, what we now call the legacy cunt. So we both actually really enjoy ass fucking. And so, but there's an interesting thing that happens, particularly in her throat and in her ass. There's this pop. As I get my cock head into the back of her throat, a little pop. And as I enter her ass, there's a pop as my cock head. And this ability to go across all her hole, feeling her come from it, feeling my arousal. 75 years old. Here I am, hard enough to fuck her in 3 holes. Give me a break. Talk about luck, right? And so this takes us a few hours. This is not a quick thing. This is an engagement. And then, frankly, and then in between, we're edging each other. You know, she's been pierced, and regardless of what people say, pierced nipples are harder all the time, and they're just fun to play with. She got a triangle piercing in it, and my God, that's arousing. It gets bigger every day. It's the clit's going to take over the universe. But this engagement of spending a few hours totally immersed in each other, not thinking about the rest of the world, focused on each other. That's a peak experience.
Beautiful. And what about your future? You mentioned that you haven't had your peak erotic experience yet, you feel, with Owned Puppet. What's something that you're looking forward to exploring or having more of in your eroticism in the future?
Well, we have much to explore ourselves, so there's much to do. But I also think that we're on the edge of thinking about how we might explore with other couples. And I think it's for us, because we play so intimately, it's not a casual thing about, we're not swingers. I don't particularly care for swingers. It doesn't work for me because I'm too engaged. I think we're both too engaged. So, but how do we be intimate with someone else and yet not lose our own connection? It's a challenging idea, but it's one that arouses us. And I think that discovering a connection with a similar people is going to be interesting because it makes us work hard. And I think when we work hard, we have big rewards.
A lot to look forward to. And finally, if you had to sum up your eroticism in one word and one word only, what would that word be today and why?
Passion. I think that living a life of passion is really important. And I used to have on my profile that I was polygamous, and it was misleading. It's not because I want multiple intimate partners, it's because my whole basic life lives between multiple loves. I love my work, I love my children, I love my partner. I love what I'm engaged with. I love my hobbies. And this idea of having a life lived with multiple loves and a life in which you don't believe that love is limited, that it's engaged in the whole experience of the way you engage with life, to me is core to me. And so more of that, please.
Sounds delicious. Well, LFF, thank you for sharing your erotic realm. You've offered a picture of power and leadership that's humble, accountable, and deeply intentional. So thank you for sharing so deeply today.
Oh, thank you. And those are great words. Can I get a loan on the basis of that? Please tell Old Puppet that. I mean, that's so wonderful. God, that's wonderful.
I'm sure
All right,
she'll be listening in. So hello, own puppet.
You put a smile on my face. Thank you so much thank you for making me think, being thoughtful. And thank you for a great time.
You're welcome. Well, thank you again. I'm Em, and this has been the Erotic Realm Podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Erotic Realm Podcast. This is an independent podcast. If you want to see more episodes made, you can support it at psychologyofdesire.com by becoming a paid subscriber and entering the realm with many other supporters. The mission of the Erotic Realm is to humanize kink and desire in all of its forms. And we can't do that without you. Until the next time, stay perverted.